If I have learned nothing else, is that you know deep down inside yourself when something is wrong or when something is right. I think sometimes the first instinct is to flee that, especially if listening to it means that there's going to be really hard change. But there's a reason it's there. And if you do nothing else the rest of your life, listen to that. We listen to everybody else and what we think they think about us and what we think they're saying about us, and listen to yourself.
Welcome to The Creator's Journey. I'm your host, Charles Gupton. Each week, I'll talk with creative leaders who face the same fears and obstacles we all face. What makes these folks effective are the processes they've developed that allow them to push through the darkness to consistently ship their work and make a difference. If you've ever felt that your fears and insecurities are getting the best of you, know that you're not alone. Every creator who works from the heart faces the same challenges. Come join our community at thecreatorsjourney.com for ideas and inspiration that will bring light and direction to your journey.
Here's the key to my front door. You got a pillow if you lost yours. You got a seat at my table. You got a home. Here's somebody who believes you. Let truth remind you. You've always got a place to go to. You got a home.
I want to welcome Tess Vigeland to The Creator's Journey today. Tess has worked in and around public radio for over 20 years, with 11 of those as host of NPR's Marketplace. In August of 2012, she walked into her executive producer's office and handed over a letter of resignation that started her on a new journey of discovery of herself from, if I'm no longer the host of Marketplace, to, who am I now? In 2013, about a year into her new lifestyle, Tess took the stage of the World Domination Summit in Portland, Oregon, to regale an enthusiastic crowd of entrepreneurs and world changers on the topic of leaving a steady job and paycheck for the dark unknown of pursuing their own path of discovery and change. An editor for Random House was in the audience that morning, and out of that talk, her recently published book, Leap, started on its journey to fruition. Although Tess will tell you that Leap is not a how to quit your job and start a new chapter in your life book, it does recount her journey to date, as well as vignettes from dozens of other people she interviewed about what they've experienced since making their own leaps. Linda and I heard Tess this past July at WDS 2015 when she took the stage again to give a follow-up from her first talk. Because the creator's journey is focused on the processes that creative leaders use to ship their best work, I wanted to talk with Tess about one of the most difficult processes, the process of knowing when to quit something that may, by all outside appearances, to be going extremely well, but in your heart, you're dying a slow death of stagnation. Tess, thanks for sitting down from your full schedule and chatting about what you've learned and where it's leading you.
Charles, it's entirely my pleasure to be here.
As you can probably pick up from my social media posts of late, I've learned a lot from reading Leap and have shared a bunch of insights that I trust will encourage others on their journey.
Great. I'm so glad to hear that. It's funny when you work on something for this long. For me, it was a 2-year process from book contract to actually seeing it on a bookshelf. You kind of just throw it out into the world and you don't know what's going to come back at you. And so hearing from readers like you who say they got something out of it, that's really all I can ask for. And beyond that, everything is out of my control. The book actually just belongs to readers now. It belongs to you. And so I'm very grateful that you read it, and thank you for the kind words.
Well, my background, having been in business for about 35 years, I've made that leap into what I call self-chosen perpetual unemployment. So it's still an interest for me, but I find that we all have to constantly make adjustments in business in order to make better work for more appreciative clients. Sometimes for people who are at least self-employed, it means letting some clients go or, and not accepting maybe profitable projects they'd like to do so that they can be challenged to grow. So I think what you've written is very applicable to people, not just who are in a corporate job and trying to figure out where to go, but for a lot of creative people that are
Right.
trying to figure out, how do I make the decisions around taking some kind of plunge or leap?
Right. And I think that is, I mean, it's almost the hardest part of life, right? Because it's so easy just to stay with what's working, or at least what seems to be working, like what's working according to everyone but you. And, leaving the familiar, leaving the comfortable is extraordinarily difficult. I had no idea how hard it was going to be. But I think you're right. It applies not just to even leaving a job, it applies to leaving a relationship, or as you said, leaving a client. Whatever it is that is making it so that your life is not as full as it could and should be, and as joyous as it should and could be. It's really hard trigger to pull, and I wish it was easier. But I also do think that the journey and the learning that you have to do about yourself along the way to making that decision is really valuable in all kinds of ways.
Well, it seems to me that the difficulty of the journey is why the lessons are so valuable and deep when we get them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And, again, a lot of it is not fun. A lot of it is very, first of all, it's very lonely. And second of all, it's very hard to stare into an abyss and have confidence that you're going to come out of it. But that said, I think that it's worth it. In kind of whatever part of your life you may have this going on, it's worth it to sit back and say, how could things really be better? Because, my big kick these days is, you got this one life to live. You got just one shot at this. Why would you spend a second of it in a miserable situation, no matter what that situation is? It's just not worth it.
So from your experience, how do you know when it's time to go? What do you tell people when they ask you?
That's actually one of the first questions that people will ask me these days. And it's funny, I didn't even kind of know that this was happening in the lead up to the day that I quit. Because I mean, I'll be honest with you, I quit in a fit of pique. And I haven't talked about it, publicly exactly why that was, but I was deeply unhappy with something that was happening in my workplace. And so I don't think that I had paid attention to the things that I now know had been building up over time. But 2020 hindsight shows me that there were three major things that I think are red flags for people to think about and pay attention to if they start happening. So first of all, it's time to go when you have too much self-respect to stay. And by this, I'm talking about, you as a human being are entitled to, a level of respect, a level of being valued, that you should not allow that line to move. You should not allow that level to move. And, yes, I'm not saying that you're not going to have bad days at work. But if you're in a situation where you are feeling undervalued, where you are feeling like you are not being paid attention to, your concerns are not being addressed, and, for some people, it even gets as bad as where you're being mistreated. If all of that is happening, you have to have enough self-respect to say, I deserve better than this. So again, it's time to go when you have too much self-respect to stay in a situation. The second thing that you have to pay attention to, and this is, it's kind of startling when you realize what's happening to you, your body will start screaming at you in ways that you may not recognize at first, because it's a whispered scream, if that makes any sense. For me, my hair stopped growing.
Wow.
Believe it or not. So I had this beautiful blonde head of hair, and I had never had issues with it. And all of a sudden it started getting thin and scraggly. And, I'm sure this, we all lose hair every day. I mean, that's a normal thing. We lose our hair, but it grows back. It's a natural course over time. Mine just stopped growing back. And all of a sudden I looked in the mirror one day and I was like, wait a minute, I have bald spots on my head. And after several visits with several doctors, there was nothing wrong with me. There was nothing wrong with me, kind of physically, I guess. There was nothing wrong with my head and my hair follicles. It was stress. And the only source of stress in my life at that point in time was my job.
Wow.
And how I was feeling about it. And I didn't even really know that I was that stressed over it. It wasn't, it wasn't what I was doing on a daily basis that was stressing me out. It wasn't the workload. It was a feeling of being underappreciated in a way that was very stark. And it started to affect me, and it started to grate on me in ways that, again, I didn't recognize before it got better after I left. So that's a really important thing to pay attention to. And, as you know, having read the book, there are several people in the book who had similar ailments, different things happen, like people who were in perfect shape physically, but all of a sudden had massive back pains, people who, for the first time in their lives, had migraines. So those are the sorts of things that, again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying that you shouldn't get these things checked out, but you should think to yourself, well, is there something going on that is manifesting in my physical being? Because quite often the emotional and the psychological will ultimately manifest itself physically. The third thing I tell people is that if you are asking yourself, how will I know when it's time to go? How will I know when it's time to make a change? What's that sign going to be in the heavens for me? Then it's past time to start thinking about it. If you are even asking yourself the question, then it's not too late, but you should definitely start sitting down and saying, okay, what's going on here? And what are my options? It's a very telling question to be asking yourself. And so it's just something that you have to pay attention to. And again, all of these things some of them can be very subtle and you don't recognize them as they're happening. But if you have that thing in your gut that we all try to ignore, it's something that you have to pay attention to. And all of these are signs that you need to at least sit down, start thinking about what is going on with you, what is going on with your work life, perhaps what is going on with your relationship, and to start thinking again about what your options are and what it might be like to find a different place to be.
A key that you mentioned that has stuck out to me is the subtle cues. It seems that stress and that fear kind of sneaks up. It's insidious, and that we don't know why we're hurting, or we start looking for outside as opposed to internal reasons, and we don't see the options because stress and fear seems to shut down options. That part of our brain just says, this is it. This is where you are. This is the way it's always going to be.
Right.
And it's not.
Right.
Or it doesn't have to be.
And I think that's especially true when, this is where I think, me and my book and the way we talk about quitting, it's a little different from what other books will talk about, because for the most part, people I spoke with and myself, my own situation is that we liked our jobs. We actually liked what we did for a living. And we were very good at it. And we had spent a lot of time cultivating experience, cultivating skills. And so that made it doubly hard to wrap your head around the idea that you need a change, because why would you leave it? Right? I mean, everything seems great. And again, as you said, that fear that is inside you, it is very insidious, but it's often very easy also to tamp down and just tell yourself that, hey, you know what? I have it really good. So sit down and shut up. And that's what we do, just we tell ourselves and that little voice inside us to sit down and shut up because we've got it good. We've got a job that we like. Maybe we're paid well. Maybe you're at the top of the ladder like I was. And to me, it was anathema to think of stepping off that ladder because I had reached, I was